I'm so excited. After that video, how can you not? That's a really good video. I want you to notice what the band just did, because what they did is powerful. They just took all the concepts that we've been weaving in and out and learning about God and about what it means to live in this world right here and right now. And they took the stories and the concepts of the Bible and they wrote their own. Do you see how beautiful that is? When we take the concepts and the picture of God and we begin to write our own stories with melody and verse and chorus, it's just beautiful. Were you blessed by that as much as I was? I had a stupid big old grin on my face the whole time. I'm surprised it didn't distract you guys. It was silly. Welcome to OC Grace. First, we want to be an authentic expression of the kingdom of heaven. Today, we move into our new series, Origins. Everyone say Origins. It's exciting. We're going to dig into Genesis and what this means for us today. And what we're going to do it a little differently. How many of you have picked up these sermon notes that we give from time to time in the front? Have you seen those notes? Okay, that means most of us haven't. So this is what you're going to do. From here on out, every time you hear something that you think, ooh, I like that, or ooh, I want to use that against him someday, those sermon notes are perfect for either one. And so pick up the sermon notes. And what this does is it just gives you something to think about throughout the rest of the week, a little bit more knowledge, a couple more concepts to kind of dig into. And we also have an after study after the service in which we get around round tables, we dig even deeper, and we ask questions, and you can kind of put me on the spot. Hey, you said this. What does that mean? Or in your groups, you can dig a little deeper. And then, this is something new. We believe life groups should be the heart and the soul of a community. And so what we've done is we've created these life group study guides that you can actually invite a neighbor, a coworker, a friend, whoever, to your house. We have leadership study guides, and we have the normal study guides. Pick up a couple on the way out. You'll see them in our life group resource table. Pick it up and study with people some of these concepts where you go even deeper. They ask a lot of application questions. And let's start building church outside of these walls. Church shouldn't just happen once a week. It should happen every single day when we come together in community. Community is where sacred space and connection to God happens. Let's make that every day. Amen? And so, before we move into this teaching over Genesis chapter 1, let me pray with you. God, we thank you. We praise you that you're good. We don't have to call you down. You're right here among us. You're showing us what it means to live, what it means to be human. We thank you that you made us in your likeness and you love us. Amen. Genesis. This book has a lot of meaning. And some of us, there was a group of us, how many would you say we had meeting online? There were 5 of us? Okay, it was like 6 o'clock, right? Okay, good. 6 o'clock in the morning. This is how dedicated these 6 people were. We would meet together online and we would study Genesis. And it took us like 3 months to get through chapter 2, maybe. This book has a ton of meaning. It's really deep. It's really powerful. And so we're going to talk about what Genesis is and what it isn't for a couple minutes, and then we'll get right into Scripture. And so let me just point out some things that Genesis is not. So here we go. Genesis. Genesis is not a book of a bunch of historical events. Because here's the problem. We begin to look at Genesis as just a story where we learn history. The problem is, what happens when the historians don't agree on certain events in the books? Well, it begins to fall apart because the Bible was not written as a history book. The Bible was written to describe who God is and who his people are in relation to him. When we try to make the Bible a history book, we begin to have problems when different accounts are told in different ways and some accounts are omitted altogether or changed completely. The Bible is not a history book. The Bible is also not this. And Genesis in particular. There was this terrible song written in the mid-90s, and it goes like this: basic instructions before leaving Earth. And it kept saying this over and over again. It was like Cashmere to Burlap or something like that. I don't remember the name of the band. Basic instructions before leaving Earth. And that's how they viewed the Bible, as if the Bible and the story of Genesis is just a bunch of books to tell you how to be good in order for you to get your golden ticket. Scripture is not that. Scripture, again, is all about the God who formed and created mankind. It is not just a bunch of interesting rules and regulations on how to get out of here. Heaven, paradise, starts here. If you're not experiencing it, you're missing the gospel message of Jesus. You need to reread the book. And lastly, and we're going to delve into this one more, so don't run away too quickly. Genesis is not a simple explanation of how man was created. It was not. If you're trying to make Genesis into that, you're going to end up arguing these superfluous arguments, and you're going to end up very frustrated with people. Because that's not why Genesis was written. It was not an attempt to explain the process and the scientific understandings of creation. That's 21st century people. We're talking about how, the world's no longer flat. That might be a surprise to some of you. You're like, what? I can finally take that cruise. The world's no longer flat. We understand that things are a little different than they were back in tribal times. We understand that when they looked down at the water, they saw blue. When they looked up, they saw blue, and water came from the sky, so they assumed there was this firmament above them, right? Today, when we go up into the heavens, we don't go through a magical water tank above us, right? We understand that's not how the world works. There are many things that the tribal people understood that they wrote about, and this is just history. This is what happened. This is how they viewed it. So when we view Genesis, we have to pull back from our 21st century understanding of the book, and we have to step into their shoes first. And the Hebraic understanding of the world was always, where is the meaning found? Everyone say, meaning. And that's what we're going to look at. So here's what this book is. This book is an ancient account of a bunch of oral traditions and stories about who God is and who his people are. Over and over again, you get this tradition, these stories all pointing back to who God is. These stories of how God has interacted with man all throughout time. Powerful. And that's why it's still amazing today, and it's still read, because there's power in it. Next, it's a message that says this: we are not alone. Is that a good message to anyone but me today? You are not alone. That's powerful. You're not alone. And lastly, again, it is a message that defines who God is and who we are as his people. And this book, how many of you guys like these book series? Lemony Snicket's or Harry Schmatter, the Tolkien series. You like some of these series and books, and the people, they do this for a reason. They'll write one book knowing that they won't end it completely so they can make more money from you. That's what they're doing. Well, Genesis was not written to make more money, by the way, but Genesis was written as part of a 5-book series. And we call this book series the Pentateuch. And this is Torah. This word means actually law and instruction. And so these books, they all come together, and the main focal point is Mount Sinai. We hear people talk a lot about the 10 Commandments, and we as Christians, we've turned this into like a bunch of rules and regulations, and Adventists, we've gone even further, and now you can't wear a dress without it being down to here, and you can't wade in the water and all those fun things. We are funny, aren't we? But I love our church. But here's the thing. The main point, the center of the story, is Mount Sinai, where God steps in and he says, this is what I look like. And when you understand who I am, you begin to relate with one another lovingly. You become the very embodiment of love. It's a new way of being human. And so this is the Pentateuch. This is the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. So that's what it is. Authorship. If you don't agree with me, you should probably stand up and throw stones. You ready? Please don't. I'm fragile. But most of us throughout our lives, we were told Moses told this story. All right? It was Moses that wrote this book. However, biblical scholarship has moved away from that. The majority of seminaries you go to, they say, no, it was not Moses. Because here's the problem when you begin to say Moses wrote this book. In the Bible, you'll find that it actually records his death. Isn't that interesting? Moses, he's a special man. He wrote about when he died. That's interesting. More stuff. Moses, it says no one knows where he's buried. That's a problem if you're writing the book. We all get that? Lastly, I want you to think about this. It says that there was not another man to walk the earth like Moses. which means, and that's Deuteronomy 34, which means there is time and space between when it was written and when it was compiled. Do you guys get it? There's a time when it happened and then when it's finally put together. So here's the thing. Moses does not talk about himself in third person. Hey, Tony, you know Tony? Tony's cool. Tony's great. Tony. The only people that talk like that are rappers and NBA players. Moses is not talking about himself in third person. These are all written traditions and stories, a lot of oral tradition as well, all compiled at a certain point in time. If you want to dig deeper into that and go further, join us in the study. Let me keep moving. Audience. The audience is very important. Who is this book written to? It's written to the Israelites. It is not written to you. However, does it have meaning to you? Yeah. Deep, profound, relevant meaning right here, right now. But the book was not actually written for you. Here's who it was written for. A group of Israelites who had just been taken from their home. Everything is destroyed. They're taken captive by this huge Babylonian empire. The world's never seen this group before. They're crazy. And they march you hundreds of miles into a foreign land with a foreign language, with foreign gods. And this is what you're saying. Who are we anymore? How do we keep what we have together? What do we do with this? And so what they begin doing is they begin telling the stories that keep them together. They say, what is the glue that kind of keeps us together? How many of you have ever been to a funeral? Here's what we do at a funeral. And it's actually pretty compelling, fairly beautiful. What we do at a funeral is this. We start talking about the deceased. And we tell stories about them. And sometimes the stories, let's be honest, they're fabricated a little bit. We kind of build on them a little bit. But here's the thing. At the funeral, we tell these stories, and it brings us together. It brings us together. And we begin to talk and laugh and share these stories. And it reunites us again, and it gives us an identity. We are so-and-so's friend. And they're dearly missed. And so God's people, they're essentially about to experience a funeral. They're saying, what is going to happen to our people? How do we hold on to our heritage? My grandfather, he came from Germany, almost post-World War II. He brought his little family over, and he told me stories about how frustrating it was to watch my daughter, his daughter. He said, I watched my daughter forget her German heritage. I hear Adventists talk about this. These young kids are forgetting what it means to be Adventist. And then you hear what it means to be Adventist. You're like, is that really what Adventist is? Anyways. I'm giving you more garbage, more to think of. The heritage, he was terrified of losing his heritage. Because he was watching as his kids forgot the language. They no longer wanted to be, well, we're not really German, Dad, we're American. And American means something, and all of a sudden you start getting Japanese tattoos and you don't know exactly what it means. Your kids are listening to Drake and Metallica, and you're like, what have we done? We need to go back to motherland. And so God's people are losing their heritage, and they're beginning to compile all of these books and scrolls and all of it in order to keep an understanding of who God is and who the people, who they are in relation to God. And that's what's going on here with the audience. That's who these people were. And so when you see Genesis chapter 1, understand that they are in Babylon and they are trying to hold on to their faith. And the other stories of the other gods, they're kind of compelling sometimes to them. And so they tell the story of Genesis 1, and it's actually a huge slap in the face to the Babylonian gods. And I want to share this before I read Genesis 1 with you. The Babylonian gods, this is what happens. Their origin stories, their creation stories. Every single empire and nation has an origin creation story, by the way. And all of them, the point and the meaning is not how it was done, it was who did it and what his creations look like. Did y'all see the difference? When you get that, you read the story very differently. It has way bigger meaning and so much more beautiful. And so here's the Babylonian tale. It goes like this. The gods step into the world And they begin, as all gods do of the Babylonians and the Romans and the Greeks and the Median Persians and the Egyptians, they start fighting. And it gets really violent and chaotic. And it ends up that the one god cuts his mother in half. Don't do that. And she's water, by the way. His mother's water. And she goes up to the heavens and down on earth. And that's how you see the expanse. And this is all the ways in which they explain their gods and what they do with the world. And so out of violence and chaos, they create man. In the Babylonians, they understood man is created to do the God's will. And so the gods must always be appeased. This is how the Babylonians viewed their gods. And let's be honest, this has snuck in a little bit in Christianity. When a Christian faith become more focused on appeasing the gods than living out the example of who those gods stand for and what they stand for, we're going to miss the point, don't we? And so that's the Babylonian tale. Here's what the Jewish one says. God steps into the chaos and he creates order. Some of you are dealing with a lot of chaos right now. And God is calling you to let him step into it to give you peace and order and life again. So the Babylonian tale is a huge slap in the face because it's essentially saying this. Hey, Babylonians, you see all those stars and all that stuff in the heavens that you think are the gods? Our God created them. Our God's better than yours. That's what he's saying. And then you need a bunch of gods to rule the world. Our God is only one. And he does it all. And secondly, you were created to do all the God's will and be basically their grunt work. We were made in his image. Do you see the political and religious ramifications of this story? This is heavy. So this is the story, and then let's read it together. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and empty. The word void, empty, it means chaos. God steps into the chaos. Notice this, it doesn't tell us where the water is coming from, all this other stuff, because that's not what's important to the story. What's important to the story is this. God steps into the chaos and he creates order. We tracking? Good. He creates order. He hovers over the waters, the chaos, and creates order. And then we step into the next 3 days of creation. I want to share with you something. Go to that next slide. My wife is going to be angry. That's our dinner table. You didn't know I was going to show that. I may be sleeping on one of your couches tonight. That's my dinner table, and that actually looks somewhat okay compared to many of your dinner tables. I've been to some of your houses. And you've been to mine, and you know this is not that terrible for us. But what happens with a dinner table is this. You begin putting stuff on the table, and it gets more and more chaotic and more cluttered. And before you know it, you're like trying to move stuff to have a plate, right? And you're like, oh, well, that plate's not that dirty from last week. I'll use that one. I have some friends that they don't even use their table anymore. They just go to the family room and they pull out TV trays because it's just too much to clean up. It's insane. It's a mountain. And so you have this huge table. And so what happens is God, like this table picture, I want you to see this. Days 1, 2, and 3 is like a table. God steps in and he begins to create space. He begins to move the clutter. He steps into your chaos. He moves the clutter and he creates space. So watch this. Day 1. Let there be light, and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. Then he separated. Did you notice that? He creates space. He separates darkness from light. We live in a culture right now where we do the opposite of creation. We oftentimes take darkness and we take light and we try to mix them, don't we? And there's a reason why Christians can go to some of the movies we do. I know I'm stepping on your toes. I'm sorry. I'm not. But there's a reason why Christians oftentimes have been associated with really violent people, gun-toting Americans, blah, 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 blah. We take darkness, we take light, and we mix it. God's saying, no, 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 separation. Separate it. Create space so the divine can inhabit it. Create space. So he creates space between darkness and light. Day 2 goes like this. Then God, he said, let there be space. Again, you'll see 3 times space is mentioned here. Space between the waters and the heavens. Again, he creates space. And he's going to fill it on day 5. But watch this. Again, creating space. Next one. 3rd day. God here. Boy, that's a lot of writing. Why would I do that to you? He creates land. He creates space. And he creates space for land to be inhabited. Here's a question I want you to consider right now. Space. Put up that slide. Space. What needs to go in your life? If you, like me, have a lot of clutter on your table, what needs to go? What chaos right now needs to go? Are there unhealthy things you continue to go to for help and you feel a sense that maybe it's just no longer working? It needs to be removed from your table. Is there an unhealthy relationship that needs to be removed from the table? Are there things that you've cluttered your life with that are keeping you from experiencing real peace? God says, when I am involved, I step into the chaos and I begin to make space. What kind of space are you creating for the divine? Is your life so busy and so chaotic, you have no time for God? You have no time for what's most important in your life. Are you allowing God to create space in your life? Because if you don't allow him to create space in your life, he will never be able to fill those places that feel empty. Because you've already filled them. Where in your life will you allow God to create space? And now the second half of this goes like this. Day 4, God begins to set the table. He's created the space. And some of you know what this feels like. You sit down as a family or just as alone or whatever, and you set a table and you're thinking, there's a sense of peace that comes with that, isn't there? Like, I can see the table. There's wood on there. It's still a table. And what God does is he steps in, he puts candles, he's romancing you. Sets the table, gets the vino, gets the plate, gets the nice napkins, all of it, sets it out for you. And he begins to pour into the space. And so day 4, it looks like this. The light and the darkness have been separated, so he fills it with the sun, the moon, and the stars. Day 2, we have the separation of the water and the sky and all that. And what he does is he fills it with sea creatures. And he fills it with the birds of flight. He's putting things in the space. Day 6 coincides with day 3. What do you do with all the space in the land? God puts creatures in it. And then he puts even weirder creatures walking on 2 feet and talking about weird things and stupid enough to create sports in which we need helmets and all that stuff, right? He creates man and he creates us in his own image. And it's beautiful and it's good. And so the question I might ask you today is this. When the space is created, we talked about what needs to go. What do you need to fill your life up with now? What do you need to fill your life up with now? Are you allowing God the freedom and flexibility to change things in your life, to place things in your rooms, in your garages, on your tables? Ask God to open your eyes to what he's doing right now, to the space that is open and free for him to fill. I want to show you a picture that's also going to make my wife cringe a little bit. That's my garage. And you can ask my neighbor Carmen, it's really bad. If you could look to the left of that, I kept it out because it's even worse. But there's tons of boxes all there on the left. Just tons of them. Why do we need all these empty boxes? I don't know. Might need to ship something. 50-somethings? I don't know, you never know. And so our garage was so packed with clutter and junk because I stored up a lot of stuff I don't need. And if you look real close, there's a lot of stuff in there. Do I really need the little horsey thing there? Well, no, my son doesn't use it anymore, but why am I holding on? I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that we clutter our lives with daily. Have you stored up clutter in your life? Are you storing up, as Paul said, wrath, anger, bitterness? If that's what you're storing up, your life will continue to be chaotic and broken and messy. Have you filled up that holy space in your life with meaningless tasks? Meaningless tasks that keep you from experiencing the passions that God's given you. Some of us, we've gotten really good at working, right? And that's become our passion. But some of us, we stopped following our passion a long time ago because we cluttered our lives up with so much stuff. That thing that God created you to do, it's so far back in the garage under all the clutter that you're not even aware of it anymore. Create space. Allow God to put what's important back in. I cleaned my garage. I cleaned it. Glory. Most of the wives are the ones going, pointing at the husbands. But this is what God is doing in my life. I'm beginning to clear out space more and more for Him. And God is beginning to fill that space. And I can tell you that years ago, I didn't know what I was passionate about because I was so busy doing so many meaningless things I was not that really that interested in. I wasn't passionate about those things. And what God did is I opened up space and He began to fill it. And I've been following those passions and that energy and all those things God's given me, and I've been placing the important things once again back in the space. And it's made all the difference for me. It's made all the difference for me. I'm following my soul's purpose, spending time learning how to be the very best Tony I can be, rather than a Tim or a Sam or a Sarah. I'm being the very best human I can be because I'm understanding who God is. I'm understanding God is a God who helps me remove the clutter so that my dreams and aspirations can fly. The creation story tells me this. I am not alone. It tells me that when my life is feeling chaotic and crazy, God steps in when I ask Him, when I create the space. He steps in and He begins to fill the space with divine presence, His love. That's what happens when we allow God the space. We're not alone. And so my question this Sabbath is this. What are you filling your lives with? What is taking up space in your life right now? My hope is that this new year, you will create that space in which the divine can enter. And you can begin living that kind of life here and now, where everything you do, you see the presence of God. Because you're following the light and the beauty of His character. You're following love in everything you do. May you open up that space, not fill it up with more clutter, but allow God to fill up that space. That's my prayer for you today.